propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. With you as always, this is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. Hope everyone out there is enjoying this weekend before the 4th of July. Those of us who are listening in from the United States, of course, know that next Thursday is the day we set aside to celebrate Independence Day. In essence, it becomes the birth of our nation, officially recognized. For our friends across the pond, apologies, but, we tend to take it as a pretty big holiday over here. At any rate, most of us have managed to avoid the storms that the Midwest has seen and the fires that the West has seen and the terrible, terrible temperatures that certain parts of the West has also seen. And as we do so, we look forward to the opportunity to grill out with our friends and family and spend time together. But as we do that, we also need to take a few moments to remember that our independence has been preserved through the work, effort, and sacrifice of both the active duty members of the military, the reservists, and that unique sacrifice that's made by their families. Hopefully, this 4th of July, I'd like to encourage some of you to take the time to make a small contribution to the Wounded Warriors Project. A small attempt to pay back some of what these people have sacrificed so that we could have our freedoms. As we continue on, I want everybody to keep that in mind. But as we focus on freedom, our independence, which unfortunately on an individual level is almost part of the American spirit that has disappeared, we also have to focus on what do you do to build on freedom. This past week there were some decisions handed down from our Supreme Court at federal level. One involving voter registration. The other, which has dominated most of the headlines in the meanwhile, has been the Defense of Marriage Act decision, which played out much the way I had anticipated. However, they certainly didn't want to make it seem like they were saying what they were actually saying. Before we get into that, though, please allow me to take this brief moment to say a prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you today to ask your forgiveness and to seek your direction and guidance. We know your word says, "Woe to those who call evil good." But that is exactly what we have done. We have lost our spiritual equilibrium and reversed our values. We confess that. We have ridiculed the absolute truth of your word and called it pluralism. We have worshipped other gods and called it multiculturalism. We have endorsed perversion and called it alternative lifestyle. We have exploited the poor and called it the lottery. We have rewarded laziness and called it welfare. We have killed our unborn and called it choice. We have shot abortionists and called it justifiable. We have neglected to discipline our children and called it building self-esteem. We've abused power and called it politics. We have coveted our neighbor's possessions and called it ambition. We have polluted the air with profanity and pornography and called it freedom of expression. We've ridiculed the time-honored values of our forefathers and called it enlightenment. Search us, O God, and know our hearts today. Cleanse us from our every sin and set us free. Guide and bless those men and women who have been sent to direct us and to the center of your will. Ask it in the name of your Son, the living Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, chances are, if any of you went to a service today, you may have heard that prayer or a version thereof. It has often been credited to Billy Graham. It's also been credited to Paul Harvey. Truth of the matter is, according to Snoops.com, both of those are actually false. But regardless of who wrote that prayer, it seems an apropos time to once again say that prayer, and I hope that some of you said it with me. There has been few times in the American history where we've been faced with such a hatred towards Christianity. It's hard to imagine a time where here in the United States we would not have a Christian culture. But we've become so secular and so anti-Christian that we are almost to the point where it is the cool thing to be openly anti-Christian. There are reasons to criticize certain Christians, but there is absolutely nothing wrong with the precepts and the teachings of Christianity. It teaches you to love your neighbors as you would love your family. It teaches you to love the sinners, but not the sin. It teaches you not to judge others. That's a part of it that we seem to have a problem with from time to time. But ultimately, the idea of having a Christian culture in the United States has passed. Make no mistake about it, this is part of a concerted effort. Since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, this nation has been under attack, trying to tear away freedom, trying to tear away the things that make the United States such a noble and grand experiment. The United States of America is a great nation because her people are good. And if we ever stop being good, then we shall surely fall. I'm not the first person to say those words, but those words ring true to anyone who pays attention and anyone who listens, anyone who's a student of history, anyone who knows anything about America's culture. Pre-1960 knows that by and large Christian culture dominated what was seen as public life here in the United States. And again, there are certain drawbacks, but there's nothing enlightened about embracing a lack of spirituality. In an attempt to appear to not be judgmental, you take it to an extreme and say anything goes. That's not acceptable. But we have too many people, especially on the further side of the left, that have done exactly that. These are the people, the so-called progressives, who've taken every step and every opportunity they have to try and down the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, because these two documents talk about something that they cannot stand, and that is not personal freedom, but personal responsibility. If you are a person of faith, you are never going to just sit back and let the government take care of you or your family. Never. You're not going to let it happen. Why? Because you have faith in God. And because you understand it is your responsibility to take care of you and yours. No matter what level of assistance a government wants to provide for you, it can never adequately take care of you. There's not enough money, and it's not about taking care of you. Even the most good-hearted, well-meaning liberal will quickly discover that any attempt to help long-term by a government takes liberty from the individuals because of the attempt to stop corruption. It's not the elected officials necessarily the problem at that point, as it is the appointed bureaucracy. Those people who are supposed to be politically neutral but providing the services the government must provide. You know, like the folks that work at the IRS, for example. We know how non-political they are. It's sad and it's tragic that we live in a time where we're embracing a culture that would like to kill us in Islam, and yet we want to demonize Christians. To me, that's unacceptable. But it is the United States that we live in, and unfortunately we're faced with not very many options. The best thing that we as Christians can do, I count myself among them, and I'm hopeful that those listening are for the most part at least open to the teachings of Christianity. The best thing that we as Christians can do, those of us who are, is to live the Christian life. If we do that, if we use Christ as our role model and we try to fashion ourselves, striving, comparing ourselves with Christ and with our most recent efforts, trying to make ourselves better people, not comparing ourselves to our neighbor, not looking at what the Joneses down the street have and being covetous, but just trying to do the best that we can do individually, then we can make progress. The Supreme Court this past week made a ruling when it comes to the federal laws involving voter registration and voter ID. Said basically it's no longer the role of the federal government to try to dictate to certain states that have in the past had serious violations and serious efforts to disenfranchise certain parts of the American voting bloc. Basically stating a simple truth that holds for the other major ruling this week as well, and that is that voting is done at the state level, and each state has the right to choose what its voting laws are. Bottom line, elections fall under the purview of the election commissions within the state. Therefore, it's a states' rights issue. The federal government does not have standing in trying to enforce any type of discrimination or anti-discrimination. No mandates of any kind. It then struck down the challenge to the Texas law, a severe and heartbreaking blow to the Obama administration, I'm sure, because now in states like Texas and here in Tennessee, the voter photo ID laws will be allowed to stand. Translation, it is not prejudicial. There is nothing disenfranchising about having to show a photo ID when you walk into a voting precinct and say, I'm such and such, I'm here to vote. All right, let us see that you are who you say you are. You have to present photo ID at the bank. You have to present photo ID at who knows how many other daily activities that people do. If you do not have a photo ID this day and age, then you are truly a rare individual here in the United States. And if that's the case, I question whether or not you're registered to vote anyway. If you're not going to take the time to get a photo ID when just about everybody needs them for daily activities anymore, why would you bother registering to vote? It is not an undue burden. It is not difficult to go get one of these, and it is certainly not befalling upon a specific group or individual that, oh, it's so much harder for you to get a photo ID than it is for everyone else to. Somebody please explain to me. I've been begging since I first heard this argument how this disenfranchises anyone. Thankfully, the Supreme Court stood up and did the right thing on this one, although they didn't actually make the ruling. All they did was say, this is a state's issue. We're not going to touch it. We see no reason for you to challenge this at the federal level. It's a state issue. That's really what they said. You cut through all the legal crap, all the double talk, all the speeches, all the flowery words, and that's what it is. This is a state issue. And guess what? When it came to the Defense of Marriage Act, that a lot of folks that are part of the gay and lesbian community are heralding as a huge victory. Again, if you actually look at what the Supreme Court said, it said the same thing. We're throwing out the Defense of Marriage Act based on parts of it being unconstitutional. The parts that are unconstitutional was the part where the federal government was taking it upon themselves not to acknowledge a legal marriage within states that permit same-sex marriage. Bottom line, marriage is licensed by the states for the purposes of legal recognition. It's a states' rights issue. That's what this decision says. Anybody who tries to read any more into it than that is missing what was actually said. It's a states' rights issue. That's all. It said, look, you can't, here at the federal government, deny legal recognition of a marriage that a state legally recognizes. Didn't say that the other states have to officially recognize these marriages. They stayed away from that. And they're staying away from the argument, too, with the Prop 8 case in California. Although I figured they would say this was a state issue with that as well. Those of you who heard previous broadcasts where I came on here and made that statement, you'll probably remember it well. They're actually taking an even wimpier excuse to throw this one out, and that is the fact that they claim the people that are actually filing the appeal had no standing in the court to do so. It was up to the state to appeal it, not you guys, so go away. That's what they're saying with the Prop 8. Now, last time I checked, the official decision on Prop 8 hadn't come down, but based on all the information and paying attention to the dissenting justices on the Defense of Marriage Act and what they had to say, that's basically what's coming down with Prop 8. So it's not a victory for gay marriage. It's a victory for the Constitution. I had almost thought that wasn't going to happen. Now, in truth, conservative values and the people who want to defend traditional marriage probably have a big problem with this. But in this particular case, the Constitution was served. I'm going to take a lot of heat from some of my conservative friends on this particular topic because I do not have the same feelings in regards to, quote, traditional marriage. Because in my mind, the government has absolutely nothing to do with actual marriage. They don't. So whatever they recognize is a matter of what the state wants to recognize. By definition, the separation of church and state prevents the government from being involved with actual marriage. A real marriage is a spiritual union. It is a spiritual thing. And it's either a matter of your personal faith or your spirituality or your lack thereof. Regardless, that's between you, them, and the powers that be. And the state has nothing to do with that. But the individual states do license what they recognize as the official civil union that they refer to as marriage. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the people who want to defend traditional things. And I don't knock them for doing so. I just don't necessarily think that this is the fight. This is a distraction. And ladies and gentlemen, please don't let them distract you. The bottom line is the gay and lesbian community in the United States equals less than 3% of the total population. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have their rights protected. In fact, as a minority, and an extremely small minority at that, they need their rights protected. That's the whole purpose. Our system of laws and limited government is designed to protect minorities from being overrun by the majority. Now, should men be able to marry men and women be able to marry women? That's really not my business. I don't see where the state has the legal right to step in cases of polyamory. If you have one of these offshoots of the Mormon Church where the folks are married to multiple wives, is that really the business of the state? If the individuals involved are participating of their own free will. Now, if they're not participating of their own free will, that's a different story. But if these people are, with the blinders off, participating in a lifestyle that they know what they're getting into and they're doing it because it's what they want to do, then I don't think it's the place of the state to get involved. God will judge them accordingly based on God's law. And the Supreme Court cannot change God's law. The Senate and the House cannot change God's law. The President cannot change God's law. Public opinion cannot change God's law. But we all have free will. We have the choice, and we have freedom in this country, or at least we're supposed to. That's what the Constitution was for, to prevent tyranny and allow the power, the sovereign authority of the United States government to remain in the hands of the people. Every step that was taken was done so just to protect that. But we have people in office now that are more concerned about maintaining power and authority than they are about individual freedom. Let's take a quick break, and after that break, we'll be right back and we'll continue with Building on Freedom. Tap into the Truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio. ladies and gentlemen, we are back here with Tap Into the Truth. Hope everyone enjoyed the short break. We're talking about building on freedom, and we're talking about the Supreme Court cases. How do these particular cases build on freedom? They really are both victories for the Constitution, and that's something that a lot of people have missed. People want to make it about gay rights. People want to make it about minority rights on the voting thing. And it's really a victory for the Constitution, and it's a victory for those minorities in both cases, in so much as the Constitution was upheld. And here's why. Because both these issues are states' rights issues. Both of them are. And instead of trying to do the typical government power grab thing that we've seen time and time again, they did the right thing, and they said, hold up. No. But they didn't word it that way. And here's the part that concerns me. Here's the part that should concern you too. Everybody involved in these decisions and the way they voted down, they wrote this in a way as to try and lose the fact that they still recognize this as a state issue. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of public opinion with this. And that's where these guys are spineless wusses. Come on. You people represent what's supposed to be the finest legal minds in this nation. Now, unfortunately, we let extremely liberal Democrat presidents choose some of these people too. So the finest legal minds on the liberal side are the folks that use the laws as they're written to try to dismantle the Constitution. And unfortunately, we have 4 people sitting on the Supreme Court bench right now that were handpicked for that express purpose. The very fact that the White House decided that they would not be defending the Defense of Marriage Act is enough of a reason for people to have to stop and question why this president, if that's what you're going to call him, I call him the occupier, but he is supposed to be the president of the United States, why he seems to think he's above the law and that he gets to pick and choose what laws he's going to follow and what laws he's going to defend. It is part of the executive branch's responsibilities to defend whatever is law. Now, they decided they weren't going to defend it at all, that they were against it. And that's fine, except for the fact that that's not his role. It is up to the Supreme Court to do exactly what they did, and that is to determine the constitutionality of the Defense of Marriage Act. And the Defense of Marriage Act, whether you like it or not, is not constitutional. And the only reason it's not constitutional isn't because there's anything wrong with saying we're defining marriage as between a man and a woman. What's wrong is that it's not the federal government's place. Marriage is not specifically part of the Constitution, therefore it is not specifically listed as one of the powers the federal government has. Therefore, when the states decided it was necessary to license whether or not you could qualify for the official legal status of being married, then it became a state issue. The Constitution clearly states that anything not specifically mentioned as a power of the federal government is not a power of the federal government. Everything not officially mentioned in the Constitution falls back to the states and or the people. Which means that there are some of these issues that's not even a state issue. Some of these things that pop up in today's society have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not the state has the right or the authority to intercede on the issue. It stays in the hands of the people. And that's why we have referendums, so that the people can have their say, that the actual majority vote will move forward and the majority gets the final say. We've tried to avoid that kind of thing in the past, mostly because straight democracy can be dangerous. Straight democracy means that the minorities will never have a fair shake. Straight democracy can be something as simple as two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. Straight democracy can be very dangerous. So the decision, while it's being hailed by certain people as this huge victory for gay and lesbian rights, it's not. Don't get overly excited, guys. I don't want to tear you down, folks. But for the conservatives that are against this, based on religious convictions, don't get all depressed either. Because, again, they not once said that all states have to recognize gay marriage. Nowhere did it say that gay marriage is automatically legal all the way across the United States. That hasn't happened. They tried to set it up so that future lawsuits can be brought against individual states. Heaven help us when that happens. But at least as for now, this group of folks basically came down and said this is a states' rights issue. The Constitution won. And that is something that hasn't been happening enough lately. So we should all be applauding it, especially conservatives. Because it means that in the states where gay marriage is legally recognized, you still can work to try and change that, if that's your goal. If you're in a state where it's not legally recognized, the federal government can't come in and say you have to. And don't start thinking that some new executive order is going to come down the pike and make that any different. While there certainly may be an executive order, the occupier has no compunctions whatsoever about writing executive orders, thinking that that has the power and authority of law, which it does not, by the way. These executive orders that he writes means nothing outside of the executive branch. The authority that an executive order has is limited to the operations and the fundamental principles and policies of the executive branch at the time he's in office, which actually also means, technically, that any executive order written under a previous president is null and void upon the election of a new one. The new oncoming chief executive has the authority to continue those executive orders or to do away with them. But they have no authority of law outside of the operation of both the elected and the bureaucratic arms of the executive branch. The EPA does not have the constitutional authority to pass the regulations that it does. Our legislatures have allowed too many power grabs by the executive branch in terms of things of this nature. We have to take back that sovereign authority as the people, as individuals. And this is a cry that has to be heard not just here in the United States, but across the world for anyone who's interested in freedom. Freedom is not easy. It's hard. Freedom is not free. It costs dearly. Blood, sweat, tears. It is not for the faint of heart. It is not for those who haven't the willpower to persevere. But for those of you who are blindly mistaken into thinking that government is the answer, government can take care of you, and you're sadly mistaken. And surely by now you've seen this. Here in the States, all you guys who have been voting Democrats and re-electing Democrats and putting Democrats in charge, if you're in a city like Detroit or Chicago where Democrats have basically run everything for decades now, how great are your towns? How great is your cities right now? Are they the vestiges of the utopian society you were promised by these people? Or are they among the most crime-ridden, most dangerous places on the planet? You're there, you live there, you tell me. Gun control's so great, why is there a single shooting in Chicago? If the Democrats care so much about the minorities, why are you still facing so much more poverty in the places where you keep electing these people and putting them in charge? Why is it that it's places like North Dakota and South Dakota and Texas, where conservatives typically run the show, where Republicans tend to get elected? Why are these the places that are doing the best for all of their citizens? Whether you're talking about the economy, whether you're talking about jobs, whether you're talking about pay rates, whether you're talking about crime rates, why is it, if these people are so great, when you put them in charge, bad things happen? And the people that are supposed to be so terrible that you'll never vote for, but in the places where they do get to be in charge, things are better. Have you asked yourself this question? Freedom is about doing the hard things. Freedom is about knowing what you can and can't do as a government. Freedom is about knowing when to say no. If you are an elected official and you have to face going in front of your electorate, you have to know why you voted a certain way, and you have to know when you have to say no to the government handouts. You have to know when to say no to the government benefits, and you have to be ready to explain why, because the government simply can't afford to continue to just give things away, because it has no money of its own. I don't care if you're talking about some city council government in some small town in rural southern America, or if you're talking about the federal government. No matter which it is, they have no money of their own. Zero. They take it in the form of taxes and penalties and who knows what else. But that's how they get it. They take it from somebody else. And if you're content voting for somebody who's going to take money away from one of your fellow citizens just because they promised to give some of it to you, then you have to question what type of character you have. Because I know a lot of folks who never bother to think about where this comes from. And that's the only reason they go along with it. We have to be able, as conservatives, to speak intelligently to these people who can be reached, who are just misguided, or who feel like they need a certain kind of help. A lot of these folks have been stuck in a system for so long that they don't know that there's another way anymore. During the Great Depression, we survived and we made it through, and we did it without having Social Security, and we did it without having government welfare. We did it because we had to, and because at that point in time, Americans still embraced freedom over dependency. Was it easy? No. Is it easy right now? No. It's not. I'm out here busting my butt almost daily. Right now, I'm putting between 70 and 80 hours a week in at my day job. That's part of the reason why I haven't been on here on Spreaker in a while. To the fans who've been watching, for me to be back on here, I apologize. Also, while I'm at it, I realize I don't think I've taken care of a little bit of housekeeping. I need to go ahead and do so. We were running a contest to Tap Into the Truth for the month of June for new followers. Drew the winner of the name earlier, just before going on the air on Blog Talk. Did just a 30-minute show over there today. TY Capitalism, you are the month of June's winner. You've won the prize pack. If you're listening right now, go ahead and send me a message, or you can go over to the website and send me the information. I need your shipping address and a phone number, because both FedEx, which is who I'll probably use, and UPS now like to have a number so they can call you in case there's some kind of issue. Certainly won't be selling it, won't be using it for commercial purposes. Not going to harass you myself, not going to give the information away. If I don't hear from you directly, I'll be contacting you, because I saw where you were following us on Twitter too, so I'll send you a direct message, let you know that you've won so I can get that information from you. Thank you for being one of the new followers of Tap Into the Truth, and congratulations on winning. And for those of you who come across today's show and are listening, if you want to start following the show, We are also continuing the same prize pack for July and for August. So the opportunity to be a winner and get a nice little prize pack that includes Country Fresh Fudge and some specific items from the Jake and Amos line of famous Amish-style recipes and Miss Miller's preserves. Go ahead and follow the show. And just a little word to keep in mind, too. You increase your odds if you're following us on both Blog Talk and here on Spreaker. And if you go ahead and like the Facebook page and go ahead and follow us on Twitter, that will also, again, increase your chances because the new followers, your name gets put in one additional time for each one of those opportunities before we go to the drawing. And the drawing is done by my 10-year-old, soon-to-be 11-year-old daughter, Cheyenne, so that it is completely on the up and up, and I'm not just randomly picking somebody that has participated. Although I am inclined to throw your name in one more time if you have participated with the show either in the chat rooms or actually by calling in the show on Blog Talk. But regardless, back to the point, we're trying to build on freedom. So in order to build on freedom, we have to hold people accountable, first of all. We send elected officials to their location, whether it be a county commission, a city council, a mayorship, a state legislator, a governor's office, the United States government federally, we send them to D.C. But we send them there to represent us, the people. And they have to represent everyone in their district. And sometimes that's hard because a district can be divided on issues. A constituency can be divided on issues. You look at what the Southern Baptist Convention did in regards to the Boy Scout decision. Well, they said that they don't condone what the Boy Scouts have decided, but they were going to leave it up to each individual church whether or not they were going to continue their relationships with the Boy Scouts. Because throughout the states, because there was a religious service mandate that's part of the Boy Scouts, a lot of churches started becoming sponsors when a lot of schools stopped. Well, there's a lot of division there. But ultimately, freedom comes from that choice. We have free will, and we have to be willing to express ourselves with that free will. But we've got to stop relying on freebies, and we've got to stop relying on people in places where they've lost their sense of individual responsibility. These Supreme Court rulings are victories for the Constitution because when you cut through all of the legal, flowery rigmarole, it comes down to basically one thing. They said in both cases, this is a states' right issue. So it's up to the states to decide. It's not for us. It's not the federal government's role to decide what is or is not legal marriage. So, Defense of Marriage Act, unconstitutional. It's nothing short of a victory for the Constitution. But we've got to continue to build on this as we look at Independence Day week upcoming. We have to continue to develop positive movements. All right, that's it for this broadcast, Building on Freedom. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Take some time, do your research, use your brain.